Hey, you know what? We're gonna have a chat. It's the morning time and this video is pre-recorded. And then I'm just mentally I'm going through some shit right now. But what I'm going through is this. I'm so back and forth and in and out between sharing the intimate details of my life on my channel, especially well, not my life in totality, but the relationship aspect of it. I'm back and forth with it because there's a part of me that says, you know what, I don't owe anyone any explanation. I don't owe anyone to have access to that part of my life. And so, I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to do that. So I think for now, I'm going to refrain from the storytelling aspect of it because it's very personal. Not because I don't want to reveal the details, or reveal parts of my life. Because, there's epiphanies that come along with that shit. I don't know if you really realize it or not, but in my storytelling, as I'm telling the events that happened at that time, it takes me back to that time. Like, mentally I'm there. And when I'm back in that time and in that moment, there's so many emotions that is brought up and the gritty details of it. And I realize those are the parts of me that probably still needs healing. If from that while ago, I can still feel like I'm in that moment. And like I stated before, it's 9 times out of 10 because that space needs healing. But the the revelation that comes up in that is I am still taking accountability, and it's not difficult, it's easy. Because when I think back and I'm in those moments, see, you gotta understand, right? When he went away and did that time, I was still very much in love with him. And the more that we communicated and saw each other and kept in contact, I just assumed that he was becoming a better version of who he was. I assumed that he's grown, and this is the impression that he's given me in these conversations and in our communication. And I am now coming to terms with, and just before I jump around, because I got a habit of doing that because I be in my head thinking a lot. I'm a diversified thinker. As I stated many times before, I don't like to use the term overthinking because overthinking has a negative connotation to it. And I know that sometimes overthinking can have a negative effect on you. I realize that. However, in diversified thinking, it just means that you think a lot and that you think of every possible aspect and or repercussion, detail, and I think those things are imperative to our growth. I think that it's important for us to remember things so that we can go back and heal them or maybe not go back and heal them, but maybe we can recognize what needs healing in an attempt to heal it so that we can elevate to a better version of ourselves with now a knowledge that we didn't have before, right? So bringing me back to that point to say this, I assumed that he was a better version of himself. I assumed that I would be even more in love with him, because if I was in love with him before he left and we were younger and we've basically grown up together at that time, he's never shown me anything over the years that would raise a red flag in my mind over the years of communication. Now, granted, the separation plays a major part because I, of course, was not around him as much as I was when we were together. You know, when we were living together, of course not. I wasn't around him as much, so I didn't get to watch him or see him just grow. Not for stalking reasons or purposes, but just to see him grow. I wasn't in on that part of his life, and so whatever communication that we did have, I assumed through that communication, through how he portrayed himself to be, that we were just going to be this like fucking power couple, because at the bottom of our separation and at the bottom of everything that we have been through, we had this common denominator of a foundation, and the foundation was built on love and respect and overcoming the obstacles that were thrown at us from the door, the obstacles that were, I guess, basic in our culture, and in coming into adulthood. We didn't quite really know it then, but we still overcame. Those were the foundations of our relationship, and I just was under the impression that our foundation evolved better, and that of course we had change and there would be some getting to know one another that we needed to do, and I was all for that, but I did not think that he was so far of a person than what he allowed me to encounter over the years of separation. And I am now coming to the accountability of being bamboozled, if that's the word, being bamboozled. I don't know why the fuck I got these glasses on, because I really only need them when I'm reading or when I am online. But scrolling online, shopping online, for the fine print, for reading. See, I didn't dig, right? And I'm not expecting a pity party. Excuse me. I'm not expecting or wanting a pity party. I'm not expecting or wanting sympathy. I just need for you to, and not need. So excuse my terminology if it's a little misplaced, okay? Because I'm not I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in communication and so forth, but you pretty much understand where I'm coming from. I want you to understand where I am in the space of taking accountability, because see, I did not these epiphanies is a motherfucker. Actually, I did some digging with him, trying to dig deeper into him to find out who he was becoming as a man. I've asked questions. I remember I have asked questions. Oh, wow. And the answers that I got were not just satisfying to the mind at the time, but it was totally understandable. When I would ask questions to dig deeper to try to find out who he was and who he was becoming, what I got was, it's only but so much that I can communicate with you through this time and through this space. We have so much distance between us. Made a lot of sense. And regarding what's going on with me personally, it's like there's a lot that I want to share with you, but it's also could have a damaging effect on this case. And I just, because they're listening all the time, you understand what I'm saying. And it just made sense. And so I stopped digging and just kept everything basically on a surface level. And even with the case being over and everything, I just reasoned with myself to be like, I don't want anything to come back and bite him in the ass or bite us in the ass, to the fact that it caused our extension to be longer in separation. So, I just went with it. And so fast forward now to when I go back and I share these stories with you, I am now back in that moment. And I remember everything that I felt, and I remember things that I was thinking, what was going through my head. And I can't quite bring it across to you the way it actually feels. I think you know that. But to be in that moment again, it is hurtful and stressful. It, you see, in our separation, I believe he was one person, and when he came home, and he was a totally different person, according to my recollection. He was a different person. It was severely traumatizing to see up close and personal his behavior towards me, his lack of respect towards me, appreciation. I had no support at all. And I just don't remember him being this type of person. So to my, I'm like, yo, I could not have been in love with this type of person. Listen to me now. So I was hanging on as much as I could, and I reasoned with myself, in his return, that what, he just has to get used to his physical freedom. Maybe he still has mental shackles. I reasoned with myself, and I said, what, you just got to keep being supportive. He needs to know that his support is still here, and as long as he has that, as long as he knows that, then he won't be afraid. Then maybe his mom won't spend so much on him. This is me reasoning with myself, thus being a reason why I felt providing all of the basics for him was the right thing to do. I felt like I wanted to show him and need him. But see, here's the tricky part. Here's where, this is an example of how you convince yourself that the love that you are going to instill into someone else will change them. It won't. And I continue to cover the basics and do the things that I felt and I thought and that I assumed would help get him to the next level. I never put any pressures on him to gain employment or do anything like that, because I felt like that was another battle. And thank goodness I was in a financial position to be able to carry the family. And in actuality, I really didn't think of it as me being the sole provider, because this is something that began to be that was routine for me over the course of 14 years. It was just what it was. And I never looked at it as I'm doing him a favor or I'm doing us a favor. I never looked at it as this is something that, this is how I looked at it. I've been doing it all this fucking time. And I'll continue to do it until he and I come to this space as a couple, that he is in the right mental space to be able to move forward in whatever he considered to be whatever his manhood called for him to do. So, once you get settled and get ready in your mind that you're ready to start working and become a productive a financially productive member in his family. But my thing was, 14 years of separation, I'm quite sure was quite traumatizing because you were in an environment in which you had nothing and no one of familiarity, okay? And and you know, I thought that that's when you find out who you really fucking are. When you have nothing or no one of any familiarity, right? And you have nothing but to stand on who you are, even though you're evolving, but all the knowledge you have accumulated up until that point. You got to stand on that shit because this is what's going to get you through the next couple of years that you have to be away from familiarity, right? And in returning, I said to myself, that has to be traumatizing within its own, because as much as we loved you, and I'm talking about collectively as a family and as a tribe and as a culture, as much as we loved you and respected you, we were not physically there to be able to go through those phases with you, right? And I felt like that was traumatizing enough. And so I said, I'm not going to force anything on him, right? I need this to come as naturally for him as possible. So I'm going to provide all the basics for him, and I'm going to tell him, I am not rushing you into being financially productive. If you can work here and you can align yourself, right? You will be a productive member of this family. You will ease yourself into leadership and head of household together, right? Because I'm not trying to push you into work. I'm not trying to push you to get out there and in retrospect, I realized that that's possibly one of the things that went wrong, that he was probably pushing himself and forcing himself when he really didn't need to, but I'm not him, so hey, I'm just letting you know from my perspective. So in providing this support, I wasn't getting any support in return. I'm not talking about financial. I, at least as a woman, I needed emotional support. I needed physical support, physical reinforcement, not monetary, but I needed physical reinforcement such as affections outside of sexual gratification. I needed emotional support because my helpmate was home, and I was very, very happy about that. And I just needed the security and the reinforcement of, you know what? We have had a trying 14 years. And I just want you to know that, I love you and I'm here for you the way that you were and are here for me. And I didn't get that. And that made me frustrated. But in retrospect, I realize now that he didn't have it in him to give. I became angry and frustrated at him being non-reciprocal when in actuality I never faced the fact that he didn't have it to give. He couldn't reciprocate what I was giving to him because he didn't have it in him. And this is where you come to terms with the reality of love, reciprocation, and mental health. Because I'm not giving him any excuses at all. But in being a diversified thinker, I'm thinking of every possible outcome and aspect. And it could be that he didn't have it because he wasn't in love anymore. Or it could be that he didn't have it and couldn't reciprocate it because the trauma was too intense. And he had, in the process of his survival in prison, he quite possibly could have unlearned. Excuse me. Excuse me. He could have unlearned how to be emotionally and physically supportive, right? Um, but then I go back, right? And I say to myself, how could he have absolutely be a different person? Now I know experiences have a lot to do with molding us, but not to be affectionate towards me or loving or at the very least appreciative. How can he be like that with me? So it is just violently the opposite. And I'm talking about all levels of abuse. All levels of abuse, right? And I'm saying to myself, how could this be that he's totally a different, like just a 360? So when I do those lives and I go back into those times and I'm into those moments, I start to see the red flags in those times and in those moments. And then taking accountability, I realized that I was so in love. That I absolutely did not take heed to any of those red flags. So when I'm storytelling my situation and I'm back in that moment and then having to take accountability for ignoring those red flags, it's like a diversified thing. It does a whole 360, you know. It spins your mind. It's like an aha moment, you know. And it's not that I'm afraid to share those details. It's not that, you know. And going back in those times, there's things that I realize I have to heal and that I need to go back. But, you know, my page is public and I don't know if I want to share those very intimate details of myself, of my life, when things started going left. That's why I call it the middle. Because up until that point, everything was beautiful. It was all heart, eyes, and growth, and love, and learning, and of course trials and tribulations. But it was like, well, it's not that bad, though. You know, it could be worse in comparison to what I've grown up seeing, in comparison to what I've grown up learning. I've always said, well, you know what? It could be worse. And so whatever it is that we went through as a young black couple, I just said, you know what? It could always be worse. So this is worth sticking out. I'm going to stick it out. It'll be okay. We'll be okay. And the middle, I'm just not sure how I feel at this time about sharing those details of my life there. Even though there's growth in it and there's aha moments, there's just there's rehabilitation and healing, and revisiting those moments and having being caught up. I just don't know if I want to share that. Some things are just meant for you personally. And yes, I am healing out loud. Yes, I am. I don't have any shame about that. But there are certain intimate details that I don't know if I want to share. You know. But when I feel like sharing, I absolutely will. When I believe there's a common lesson, because as different as most of our stories are, they have a lot of commonalities too. So, I want you guys to have a wonderful day. It's a gloomy day today. It's very gloomy out. It's not sunny. It's gloomy. But it's a beautiful day. February 22nd, 2022. Peace and blessings to you. We're going to get up again soon.